everybody. Welcome back to the Mud and Rib Podcast. We are on part 2 of our mini marriage series. And today we're going to be talking about emotional connection and intimacy, which will include us talking about sex. So if you have kids in the car or you're listening to this with people that you don't want to hear this conversation, then you might want to wait till later. But we're excited about this conversation. I want to kick it off by saying we are by no means experts when it comes to sex and marriage. However, we have a lot of experience working through some of our own struggles. As we said in our last episode, this was something people asked, what were some of the things that you fought about? And this was definitely one of them. And so it was a difficult couple of years for us. And actually for probably 10 years, we still really struggled, and certainly not perfect today, but way better than it was when we started out. So we're just going to share from our experience, things that we've learned and we've helped other people with. And always clarify up front, there are a lot of nuances to this and things that could be appropriate for you to have more strong boundaries in a relationship. But this is about ideal is what we want to talk about.
Yeah. And we want to, of course, start out by talking about purpose and just some thoughts around sexuality, because you have two extremes. You have some who do not have a commitment to the purity that Christ has called us to. And so they don't know about the damaging things of saying why God created it and the damaging things that come as a result of not following his guidelines. But then the other side, you have this overemphasize of purity culture where it's almost a prudeness or not understanding the gift that sex is in the context of marriage and how it's a beautiful thing. It's a gift to be unwrapped by a husband and wife in covenant with God. And so we want to talk a little bit about how important sex is in marriage and why God designed it to be in the context of covenant relationship in marriage. So we talk a lot about being image bearers from our home. And when a man and woman covenant with God, they covenant together to be in their role or their function is to be image bearers from their home. And in Ephesians 5, it talks about this being a beautiful picture of Christ's love for the church and how Christ entered into our world and how he birthed or restored us back to the garden again, and how marriage is a picture of that. And Christ desires to multiply, and God desires to produce fruit through our lives. And I'm talking about the physical fruit of the womb, at which when we come together, when we are fully functioning and healthy, it produces children, and sex is a part of that, but it's not just that. But the amazing thing to me, Kelli, about this is that I don't know of any other mammal or even animal in the animal kingdom that sheds blood the first time that there is intercourse. So in a woman, there is a hymen, and when she is a virgin, that hymen is intact. I mean, there's certainly things that it can be broken before, but the fact is that a virgin human woman has a hymen, and when sex happens for the first time, blood is shed. And I believe that's a blood covenant that God wants us to have, and how important that is that it's a covenant between a husband and a wife. That is a biblical marriage. And it's not even a biblical marriage. It's not just a man and a woman. A lot of people say that, and it's like, no, it's a man and a woman covenant with God. That's a biblical marriage. It's God in a covenant with him, so much so that God created woman that the first time she's to have sex, a blood covenant is shed.
Wow.
And so those are things we really don't talk about how holy and beautiful it is. But as we talked about, sex is a gift. But one of the things we're also not taught is that the damaging things that happen when we have sex before we are married, and we bring multiple partners into a marriage where we want to be one, but you can't put a condom on your mind.
Yeah.
So there's all these grooves of past memories and things like that can be overcome, but that is a reality.
Absolutely.
And so it undermines the oneness that God designed us for in a covenant marriage between a man and a woman where blood is shed and there's a commitment to purity until you're married.
Right.
So God is not trying to rob us. He's trying to protect us, and he wants us to experience the gift of sex that he designed it for. All right, I
So that's even part of my story, is that I heard someone speaking about sexual purity, and they talked about, if you've made mistakes when it comes to this and fallen into sexual impurity, that God can restore that. And he can't restore this hymen that was already shed, but he can redeem and restore your life in such a way that moving forward, you can walk in purity. And that was the thing that was keeping me from making a decision to follow Jesus, was because I thought, I'd been married and divorced. I'd been promiscuous before that and just had no real self-worth or value when it came to that, or even knowledge of the importance of this. And I had those thoughts in my mind. And it was in that moment that I made a decision to follow Jesus, because for the first time I realized that he could restore that emotional and mental part of that in my life. And I think it's important for people to hear, there is ideal, and there's a lot of brokenness. And because you have brokenness doesn't mean you can't get back on track to a healthy sexual relationship.
Yeah, both of us, I came from a family of a lot of divorce, a lot of sexual dysfunction. A lot. And so I didn't even know there was anything wrong with it. I just thought it was fun. You just follow your desires. Remember we talked about how you threw me under the bus about the well digger, which desires pleasure more than anything. And that was one of my addictions and desires. Was I just thought that's what we do. We pursue sex. And that was what I was doing. And then whenever I came to Christ, I started reading the Bible. I was like, what the heck is this sexual immorality stuff and this purity stuff? And one of the things that I can say, and it's a big part of my story, a lot of brokenness along the way that I wouldn't bring into this, but God taught me purity. And for 2 years, I didn't even date, and I committed to you before I was married to be pure, so that on that day we could kneel by the bed and say, God, thank you for the gift of one another. And as we unwrap this gift, we celebrate you and thank you for the gift of one another.
Yes.
And I felt, and it's kind of amazing knowing your background and the lack of trust you had with men. I feel like that it demonstrated to you that I waited for you before I saw you. And then I waited for you until that night that we made our covenant. We consummated the marriage, as I like to say, girl.
Oh, Lord. Here we go. He likes to do anything he can to make me feel uncomfortable.
Kelli does chase me around a lot.
Yes, I chase you around all the time.
Chase me around a lot because I'm so hot?
That's right. That's exactly it.
So let's get into some of the verses about sex being a gift. And first is God says, I give the gift of sex that you may create life. That's Genesis 1:28. So it's given that we together can create life. What a beautiful gift that is. I give the gift of sex for intimate oneness. We talk about oneness a ton here. Ephesians 5:31-32, which I already talked about. We demonstrate that intimacy that we have in Christ and in the Holy Spirit, that we have intimacy with one another. Then I give the gift of sex for a unique knowledge to know. That's Genesis 4:1, that it's to know one another.
In a way unlike you know anybody else.
That's correct. That's right. It's intimate knowledge. And that's to be preserved in the context of marriage and covenant. I give the gift of sex for pleasure. Proverbs 5:19, and that's the beautiful thing. The gift of sex is also intended for pleasure, not just for procreation or multiplication, but it's also given for pleasure, and what a joy that is. I give the gift of sex as a deterrent to temptation. That's 1 Corinthians 7:5 that also says in 7:7, I think, your body does not belong to you, it belongs to one another. That my body belongs to you, your body belongs to me. And part of our worship is with our body, that we worship God when we enter into a covenant relationship, unlike the pagan worship that would go to a temple and they would worship through sex. We worship through covenant marriage with God. We worship God, and part of that celebration is a deterrent to temptation. And the last thing is I give the gift of sex for comfort. That's 2 Samuel 12:24. That was referring to, I believe, David and Bathsheba.
Can we unpack a couple of those? I want to talk a little bit about the whole idea of I give the gift of sex for pleasure. So in your case, you felt like that's what it was all about, was pleasure.
Yes.
But in my case, because I had been with people who they thought that way, I struggled a lot with this idea of pleasure. It caused me to almost resent that or think that maybe there was something wrong with that because I'd had bad experiences with that. Then it was all about that person and never about me.
Right.
And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. I think the thing that changed with us in our relationship and kind of redeemed and restored that is the fact that you never made it just about you. You know, where a lot of times I hear women talk about their husband's need and they have sex and it feels like it's just to meet his need. And I know I would grow weary of that, but because of your willingness to do whatever it took to make sure that I was cared for in our sexual relationship, it helped to restore me seeing that the pleasure part of it is something that's like shameful or sinful or bad. And I also think kind of the purity culture where we just talk about being pure, but we don't talk about the gift of sex causes people to think that there's something wrong with having pleasure in that.
Yeah, I coach and mentor as well as you do a lot of young men, and I've been surprised a few times in the coaching just around marriage and sexual relationship where the guy didn't know that part of his role in serving his wife is to bring her pleasure in this process and not just for your own selfish needs, that it's actually a place to serve. Mm-hmm. Now, you can talk about that because it takes communication, and we can talk a little bit about that, and we will, that there are some times where you just need to communicate through and just say, hey, tonight, can we have a quickie? Sure. But the husband's role is to initiate and enter in. Now, we can talk a little bit about, does he always have to initiate?
No.
No. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, I think.
Yes. The other one I wanted to talk about is I gave the gift of sex as a deterrent to temptation. So again, this is because of my past that I felt this way. But when we got married, I thought to myself, just quite frankly, that's not my job. Like, I shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to remain pure, and I shouldn't have to do that just for the sake of deterrent to temptation. And that's wrong. But I just want to say that because I don't know if there's anybody else that feels that way or has felt that way, but I did. And so I've really had to change my mind about that. And that's where I think that it's really important for us to just know that's not a bad thing. That's the way God made our relationship, and that's part of the gift, is helping one another in our struggles.
Yep, for sure.
So one of the questions, there's a lot about this question.
Right.
Frequency of sex. How often do married couples have sex? How often is normal? And what are unrealistic sex goals per week? And so a lot around frequency is one of the questions that people have. So we wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, one of the things we do in coaching, in our coaching, marriage coaching, premarital coaching, is talk to them about, what do you think is a realistic expectation? Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a set number, but I think that it's good to have a number as a goal of what you two can agree upon. So for us, it's 2 or 3 times a week, and it has been the whole time we're married. It's set for during periods of you've had a baby, had a hysterectomy. So there has been seasons where, in mutual agreement, 40 days fasting. I know how much you love to fast.
We've never fasted from sex, guy. Don't even lie to the audience.
Whoa. But we have fasted.
We have.
Yes, fasted and prayed. So that's one of the things I think that it takes communication. Mm-hmm. There's no set number.
Right.
But I will tell you that there's some pretty unrealistic expectations by some. Like, some think you have it every day. If both of you agree with that, great. But that's not realistic. often I've seen with men that have that kind of heightened drive, it's either I guess it could be high testosterone, but often they're messing with porn.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've said it, is that communication around this is important.
Yeah.
And also, I think that this communication might have to happen multiple times throughout your marriage, because I think you may have an idea of what you think when you first get married, you know, or before, like if you do premarital and you talk about, oh, I think we're going to have sex. We agree to 5 nights a week or whatever. And then you get married and then you realize, oh, we both have jobs. I'm tired sometimes. Sometimes somebody's sick. The wife is now on her menstrual cycle. So there's all these things that you don't think about when you come up with these numbers, and it's not, you find, oh, that's not very realistic, but we agreed to 5 times a week.
Right.
And so then you also go through phases. And I know sometimes people want to talk about asked about in this poll, how things change through seasons. And I think that there are seasons, which oddly enough, when I was pregnant, I had a higher sex drive than I have at any other time in my life. Right. And I know it's because of blood flow and things like that. Yeah. But there are seasons that when I was a new mom, nursing a baby, all of those things, it is a very hard to go from nursing a baby to being with your spouse in a sexual relationship. And so I think there's a lot of communication. So my point is that you have to communicate. Yeah. And I think that there's such uncomfortableness talking about sex that, and I experienced this, but we've come so far in communicating about it that I feel like we can communicate through almost anything related to sex. And because of that, it's made things healthier.
Absolutely.
And you've been sensitive when there's times that I'm struggling.
Yes. It hasn't always been that way. Man, some of the worst painful conflicts we had in our 30s, maybe early 40s, was around this. You know, sometimes it just broke my heart, you know, just around why this is such a problem. You know?
Yes, it was a struggle.
For sure. What you got?
Okay, so I think we've determined it's what you agree upon, but it has to be both of you agree upon. And I don't think one should feel like they have to, and this is such a fine line, have to agree because the other one wants that.
Right.
But I also don't think you should withhold just out of selfishness.
Yes.
So there needs, the agreement needs to be out of a heart of truly wanting to serve one another, not out of a rebellious attitude.
Yep.
Is important. So the other is just with the frequency is there more to connection? So we're talking about, this is also just about emotional connection, right. More to connection than just sex.
Well, I mean, there's a side question to me I think would be good to talk about. Do you think that women tend to connect more emotionally and men tend to connect more physically, sexually?
Yes, I do. I don't think that all men are that way.
Yeah.
But I think that women definitely need more emotional connection before they're going to more openly enter into sex.
Okay. But there are, just like a lot of things, there are different sex drives and just differences in people.
Absolutely. I mean, I know some women that their sex drive is higher than their husband's, and some that the husband's higher than the wife. Okay.
So that's important. And so with that, like you said earlier, you have to work through that and communicate.
You do.
Through that, which is challenging, I think.
It is. It is challenging. But I think that one of the things to this question is that if you expect your spouse, I don't care if it's a husband or a wife, to enter into this type of vulnerability with the other person, if you think that's going to happen without there being other types of connection, then I think you're mistaken. I think that the depth of intimacy that happens, and you might actually have the act of sex, but there being any kind of openness or vulnerability is going to be greater and deeper if there is emotional connection. And this just means things like, one of the things you've always been good about doing is if we knew that it was a night for us to have sex, then you would help me with the kids. I mean, you always help me with the kids, right. But maybe there are things you did extra to make sure that we could get to bed early enough, right, so that we're not both exhausted. Or, you know, I know a lot of wives specifically, because I just think there's a lot more responsibility at home for wives. their husbands want them to drop everything and have sex, but then they're resentful because they're like, but I've got all these things I need to do, and you're not doing anything to help me get to that place.
Yeah, that's another place of just serving one another, working together as a team. It's like, hey, there's a great benefit that comes from this. Let's get the job done together. And then that's true about a lot of things, is just being a team. And that's just the way I love the way that we function that way.
When I think encouraging one another, saying kind things to each other, complimenting each other at times other than just when there's sex involved is important, because I think it builds a safe place and trust between the two of you, that everything you're saying is not just to have sex.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. That's why I just pat her on the butt every now and then. That's really helpful.
My gosh, guy pats me on the butt too many times, too many places. Okay, so anything else you want to say about just a connection outside of sex?
Well, yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about oneness and intimacy, and the more intimate you are with one another, I think emotionally, mentally talking about things and communicating with our words, the better the connection is physically.
Yeah, so just like we talked about in the episode before about communication, there needs to be excellent communication. This is just, honestly, communication is the most important thing, I think, around sex if you want it to be better.
Yep.
You have to be able to have hard conversations and lovingly ask questions. What makes you feel that way? Is there anything I can do to help you feel differently? Anything that you can do to help that person in their struggles or feeling like it's not a safe place or whatever you need to do. And I think it will make a huge difference in your sex life.
That's good.
We've talked about differing sex drives. One of the things that I want to talk about is insecurity in our bodies and about how that affects sex. And so I can speak from me. I have to be honest. If you ever feel insecure in your body, I have never known that to be true of you. Is it true?
Wow.
Have you ever felt insecure in your body?
Not so much.
I really do think this is probably more of a female thing, but I'm not saying it's true, because there are men that feel insecure in their bodies too.
Yeah, for sure.
But I can only speak from my perspective, that I think that there's a couple of things that fall into this category that cause this. I've told you before that my whole life growing up was about how I looked.
Right.
And so everything was how I looked. And that feels nice and complimentary when it's happening, but you don't realize until later how much that can cause you to think, well, everything is about how I look. And so as I've aged, or as I had kids and my body changed, it just created a lot of insecurity in me, because my body is now different than it used to be. And one of the things that I think is so important as a spouse of someone who maybe is struggling is, instead of saying, no, you're not fat, or no, you're not this, I think it's just taking opportunities to reaffirm the positive and beautiful things you see in the other person all the time, not just at those times.
Right.
And just really speaking truth over them about who they are as a person, both physically and who they are in their character, helps to break down some of those insecurities that affect females or males opening up fully during sex. So that was one of the things I want to talk about. And one of the things that's really been, honestly, kind of a game changer for us. And I don't know how other people feel about this, but I'm going to tell you it's a game changer for us. Our spiritual pops talked to us about this, and it's about 3 different types of sex. One is, it's just using a restaurant analogy: fast food, home cooked or casual restaurant dining, and then gourmet sex. And I think when we agreed that this would be kind of a philosophy of approaching our sex life, it changed everything. Because especially during the years of having young children and babies, I just did not feel like I could have sex as often as we had agreed to, that took a longer time, that was more what we might call gourmet sex, with a lot of foreplay and a lot of the things that go with that, all 3 to 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. And when we came to a place that it was okay if we had a quickie or what we would call fast food sex that might be brief. Maybe it just meets a need that you have for the night, or maybe it meets a need the wife has for the night. But that's really all it is. And that both people don't even have to have an orgasm. Obviously, men are going to, women don't always. But I think that made a huge difference for us. And then the home cooked or the casual restaurant is just regular, consistent sex that's loving sex. And then gourmet is more of we're going to go away on a trip.
Go away somewhere.
But one of the things that we did, and we have done in the past, and it'd be a good thing to do on a regular basis. And I got this from a book called Intimate Issues, is I planned for a night for us. And in different rooms of our house, I had something different set up. Not that we had sex in every room of the house. I know Guy would have probably loved that.
It's like, wow, that's awesome.
That's not what we did. But it was just, okay, we're gonna sit by a fire in here and we're gonna talk. And the next room was, I don't know, a glass of something to drink, whatever. And then each room just progressed toward that. And that was what I would call more like gourmet sex. There was a lot more thought put into it. There was an environment created, things like that. And then I feel like home cooked, casual restaurant. How would you describe that?
Home cooked, casual restaurant. In more of the rhythm of things. It's not something where we say we have a quickie, but it's also not something where we go away or that.
Right.
And
so those are once we came to that, and just like you said, you don't want to make it to where every night is a quickie, but you also don't have to have every night as gourmet sex. Then I think it really took a lot of pressure off of me of feeling like I was always failing in some way.
I think in this, an honest just struggle for me was that often just for the majority initiating. And that's been a challenge with Kelli and I. But I've always just said, I'm just going to continue to pursue her and initiate her, whether she initiates it back. And that's been a challenge.
Yeah, it has been.
What are your thoughts about that? Any feedback around that?
I'll try to be better, honey.
That's good. After 35 years, great.
So you can see we still struggle. So you can just join the wagon with us.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's something that has to be worked on, and just has to be a choice. So.
And my deal is if you're a man, you are an initiator. And one of the things I think one of the roles of a man is to initiate. And so, but it's great to have your wife initiate too. Mm-hmm. It's a blessing. You want to feel desired. And so that's a gift back to you. But to me, one of the things I challenge men is just initiate.
Right.
It's like I'm waiting around for her to initiate. It's like, bro, just initiate. Now the struggle can be is you just get rejected over and over and over again. That's a real challenge. And that's something that will have to be worked on. And that's a problem in the marriage. Right. If you're getting, just constantly rejected in all of your initiation and you're supposed to be married, this is a gift to you to be shared together. And that to me is a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think there were some times that I rejected you, but more than anything, I just didn't initiate.
Yes. Oh yeah. For sure. I would agree with that. And
so I feel like that there are so many things that we could talk about around sex. The last thing I think I want to talk about is it appropriate to have boundaries in sex?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's tons of freedom that you have, but if you're uncomfortable with certain things, then yes, it's okay to have boundaries. But you do need, again, you've got to communicate and work through that. But I also think you have freedom. You belong to one another. Enjoy, but I also think if there's something that you don't want to do, and particularly if it gets a little kinky and weird, don't do it.
Right. And like you said, it takes communication. And so one of the things that I was reading earlier, and I really appreciate this, is as people who follow Christ, we want this to be something that's God honoring. And I don't think in any way that God looks at anything that we're doing in sex and says that's outside of, like, that's not okay. Yeah. Meaning if you're married, it's okay. Yeah. But there are some things, if you're using nasty language, if you're using derogatory communication towards your spouse, almost like it's a porn video, then that is not honoring. And those types of things are okay to say, I'm not comfortable with that. If there's something that hurts you physically, that it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable with that. Let's do things a little differently. Yep. Things like that. I think but again, that takes communication. And so you need to have, and that's where you've got to work on communication in so many when you don't work on communication in the small things, then how the heck are you going to have communication around this? Yeah. And so you've got to, extend yourself some grace, but also start communicating around the small things so that you can get to this level of communication and have safety and agreement and enjoyment around what you're trying to accomplish in your sex life.
Yeah, and I just have to say that, Hollywood has destroyed, as well as pornography, has just destroyed healthy expectations and healthy rhythms of sex. There's very few shows, etc., that communicate healthy sexual rhythms and even realistic sexual encounters.
You mean you don't wake up with beautiful breath every morning, or you do wake up with good breath every morning?
No, I don't.
And that's how they make it look.
Exactly.
And then everybody's body is perfect.
Yes. And it's all romantic. All the time. Mm-hmm. Like we said, we have those gourmet times, but they're about once a quarter, or twice a year where we go off somewhere and do something like that. So the expectations that have been created by that, I think is destructive to our marriages and our sex life. And it would be important for us to change our thinking around that.
Can you just maybe enlighten us a little bit on how does porn affect the marriage bed?
Well, one, it's just a form of betrayal. But two, I think there's all kinds of expectations, and it's done not within the guidelines of marriage, and it just creates stuff in your mind that is undermining the oneness in the marriage and the intimacy in your sexual relationship.
So you see things that are not necessarily, they're not appropriate, yes, and they're not done in a covenant marriage. And then you have these expectations that your spouse is going to perform or do these things. Yes. And then there's disappointment or whatever, but it's disappointment around something that's not healthy or appropriate to begin with.
And I would even say, and there's some, I don't have the research on me, I can't put it in the show link, but I have heard, so just take that as it is, that tons of the ED, erectile dysfunction, tons of the premature ejaculation, so many of the problems that happen sexually between couples, particularly with men. Now, women now pornography is rampant among women too, but is related to porn. So it creates all kinds of, to me, dysfunction, terrible expectations. It's just a problem.
Yeah. Thanks for talking about that. And thank you for joining us around what can be an uncomfortable conversation. But I think probably 30 years ago, I couldn't have talked about this.
30 years ago.
20 years ago.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very open with my accountability group, with girls, with women that I work with about just things that they ask. And but this is a lot more vulnerable. No telling who's going to be listening to this. I said before, if my kids are listening, they wanted to turn it off. Yeah. They wouldn't want to hear this.
They're probably trying to scrub their minds.
Yes, my parents have sex. So we appreciate you joining us for what can be an uncomfortable topic, but we have complete hope and confidence that God can redeem our sex life. He can help you in your communication. A lot of this comes down to dying to self, putting our loved one, our husband, our wife ahead of our own needs, and believing that they're going to do the same. And even if they don't, doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter the results, because over time, I believe that wins people over and builds a place of trust. And like we said before, this takes time. Trust has to be built. You can't be someone who's had an affair or has a problem with porn and say, I'm sorry, and expect your spouse to be okay the next day. Yeah. This takes time It takes trust building. And so our prayer for you is that you will lean into those things and see God work in your life, and that you would have an enjoyable, pleasurable sex life that even into your old age.
Yep. Every good and perfect gift is from above, from a good Father, and that includes sex. So God bless you. Thanks for listening.
If you like a show, and enjoy it, would you like, subscribe, share, write a review for us? We want to make sure that other people get to hear the show. And so we will put everything in our show notes, and we look forward to our next episode in our mini marriage series.
Blessings.